Welcome, everybody, to a Monday morning episode of the Call Sheet Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Smith, here at the Fans First Sports Network. Another great week of shows lined up on tap as we get a little bit closer to the start of the NFL season. And today's episode is about what those head coaches are going to need to do on the day-to-day to be able to have successful seasons in 2025. We're calling this episode The Head Coach as Gardener. What are the parallels between being a head coach and being a gardener, working in a garden, working in a yard? I came upon this topic because that's exactly what I was doing yesterday. I was out in the yard on Sunday. I like working in the yard. I had an opportunity to get some stuff done and went outside, cut the grass, cut down some limbs from a tree I'd been meaning to get to. And then I got to my gardens, the flower beds, the shrub beds, etc. And I was like, uh-oh. I realized that I hadn't paid them much attention lately. I think the previous time I'd cut the grass, I recognized that there were some weeds growing in the garden, but I was a little pressed for time. I didn't quite get to it. And, you get a little lazy in the summer. It's summertime, right? I can go to the beach. I can, go out with my family and do something fun. I don't want to weed the garden. But the tricky thing about that is if you don't weed the garden, the weeds will be relentless and they are quick to overtake it. And all the work you've done to build this beautiful environment goes by the wayside very quickly. It doesn't take much of you ignoring it for it to quickly turn, and the weeds will take over. And as I was weeding the garden, sweating and not particularly happy about it, I'll be honest. I mean, I like working in the yard, pulling weeds. Not exactly one of the things I look forward to, however. But as I'm weeding the garden, I thought to myself, this is what it's like being a head coach. This is what you do as a head coach. You weed the garden. If you don't weed the garden that is your program, the weeds will win. They will overtake it quickly, and the beauty of your program will soon dissipate. Okay, what are we talking about exactly? How is the head coach a gardener? Why must the head coach constantly weed the garden? Because weeds start out as these little things. You barely notice them at first. They pop up here and there. If you're diligent, you pluck them right away. You stay on top of it. You make sure they don't spread. If you're not diligent, that's exactly what they do. They begin to spread. As a football coach, they can take many forms, many different types of weeds in your garden, many different types of so-called weeds within your football program. What are some examples? We'll give some of the smaller examples first. You have little things throughout the year, like making sure players are on time. I mean, this has nothing to do with on-field performance. This doesn't take any special ability. Be on time for meetings, for the weight room. If you're a high school program and you're running 7-on-7s in the summer, be on time. If you're running a charity event, if you're asking your players to volunteer for something, be on time. Wear team colors. That was always a rule in our program. I even gave them 4 colors they could choose from. Red was our predominant color, but we also wore black. And then you have lots of team gear that comes in white and gray. So you could choose any one of those colors, red, black, white, gray. Wear one of those. If you can't wear one of those, that's a weed growing, because that tells the head coach you don't care. But if you're the head coach and you don't police that, that tells the players you don't care. Why have a policy that's not enforced? That's a weed growing in the garden. Clean the locker room. Something I was not great at enforcing early on in my career as a head coach. Not diligent enough. That's a weed I didn't pull when I should have constantly pulled it. I didn't think about it. There's a million other things to think about. Yeah, and then, you show up the next day, the locker room's clean. So it was like, hey, fine, the locker room's clean. No big deal. But what you realized over time was, oh, the custodian cleaned that. Why should that be the custodian's job? Why should the custodian, simply because he's a custodian or she's a custodian, have to clean up after your football players who are perfectly capable of cleaning up after themselves? They can throw away their wadded up balls of tape. They can throw out their Gatorade bottles, their Uncrustable wrappers. They don't need to throw that stuff on the floor just because a custodian ultimately will clean it up. That's a weed that grows in your garden. Those are the little ones. And then you get to bigger ones, like effort. And when I say effort, I'm not even talking about a game. I'm not talking about, hey, is this guy going as hard as he can for 6 seconds on Friday night or in the NFL on Sunday afternoon? I'm talking about when you're running sprints and everybody's got to sprint out to the 20 and touch the line and come back. Do they touch the line? Does everybody touch the line? If you say to everybody, start behind the line, does everybody start behind the line? Okay, maybe they don't. Maybe a kid starts with his toe on the line. Does that matter? Absolutely. It absolutely matters. Why? Because it's a weed. It's a weed that grows. And if you don't pull it, others will grow. That kid had his toe on the line. I guess it doesn't matter if we have our toe on the line. Coach doesn't care. He says get behind the line, but look at these guys. They got their toes on the line. I don't care. Then where I put my toe. And the moment that they start not caring about those things is the moment that the weeds begin to spread. How about this? Finish all the reps in the weight room. Finish all the reps in the weight room. If you got to do squats for sets of 8, but the weight is heavy, too heavy for you to finish 8 clean reps, you get to 6 and you realize I can't do the last 2. What now? What are you doing? Are you racking it and walking away? Are you racking it, changing the weights real fast like a NASCAR pit crew, putting on a little bit less and banging out those last 2 reps? That's what the diligent gardener demands of their players. The diligent gardener demands that they get conditioned so that they finish that set. Because, okay, so what? You didn't get the extra 2 reps in. Well, how many weight room sessions do you have over the course of a year? 100? More? Let's just say 100. If you have 100 weight room sessions over the course of a year and you short yourself 2 reps on the squat, 2 reps on the bench, 2 reps on the deadlift every workout, that's 6 reps, 8 reps you short yourself every workout 100 times a year. You're shorting yourself 600, 700, 800 reps over the course of the entire year. You think that those 600, 700 reps could make you a better football player? You're damn right they will. Don't let that weed grow. Here's one more. Finish through the line, not to the line. That's a big one, man. Run everything through the line. The line is where you end. It's not where you come to a stop. You don't gear down until you reach the line. You sprint as hard as you can through the line. Enforce that stuff. Effort. What about attitude? Now, the weeds are getting a little bigger now, right? They're getting a little bit more invasive because once a poor attitude begins to take hold within your program, bigger problems will arise. Are you a coachable player? I'll never forget watching this video that was up on Twitter years ago. It was like one of the early ages of Twitter. One of probably the first videos I think I ever remember seeing on Twitter. And it was of former Tennessee Titans and then Washington Redskins player Albert Haynesworth, who had been a high round draft pick, was a stud defensive tackle, and then he signed a massive contract. And it's funny, his play fell off dramatically after he signed that huge contract. But it was a video clip of him at practice. And the defensive line coach, I think he was in Washington at the time, trying to instruct him on technique as he went through a drill. It wasn't just him, it was kind of all of the defensive tackles. And the first couple of guys went through the drill, full speed, giving a great effort, and Haynesworth, in what was absolutely a disrespectful gesture at his coach, just kind of walked through the drill and haphazardly slapped at the bags. And I remember thinking, man, that's a cancer. That's a weed. That's a guy making massive amounts of money. He just signed this massive free agent contract to come over to Washington. And look at the attitude he's brought with him. He is going to poison that well. That was a Dan Snyder special, by the way, Albert Haynesworth. What about your attitude when you address the media? What about the way that you speak publicly about your team? Now, this is more of an NFL thing than it is in the lower levels of football. But when you air your grievances to the media, that is a huge weed that is grown. Probably symptomatic of something larger underfoot that people don't see. Players, when they throw coaches under the bus. I mean, Dak Prescott did it with Mike McCarthy last year. Didn't name him by name, but said all sorts of things about the dysfunction in the locker room and the reasons he didn't like the offense. Interestingly, Mike McCarthy got fired. It happens the other way. I mean, sometimes you'll see coaches throw their players under the bus. I mean, Jared Mayo did it in New England last year. Talked about just the lack of effort and the lack of playmaking, and really kind of pushed off after a bad loss to Miami the responsibility for that thing on the players. Doug Peterson did the same thing in Jacksonville last year. Not surprisingly, Jared Mayo and Doug Peterson both out of jobs right now. The public airing of grievances is usually a sign that the attitude of those within the program is not where it needs to be. Another weed that grows in your program at every level is entitlement and accountability. Holding players accountable, particularly the best players. Do you let your best players get away with stuff? At the high school level, if your best player comes to you and just says, hey coach, I'm a little banged up today. You know, I hurt my hip on Friday night and it's just not feeling that good. And I'm just going to, be in the trainer's office. I'll get treatment today. And you're just like, okay, he'll be, coaches will rationalize this stuff all the time. Hey, as long as he's ready to go by Friday night, we just need him on Friday night. But then a lesser kid comes to you and says something similar and you're like, yo, buddy, you want to be in the lineup, you better get your butt out at practice. What kind of message is that sending? The entitlement that some players get, that others don't, can create weeds in your program. Which is not to say that you have to treat everybody exactly the same. You do not. But holding players accountable is important. What's the famous John Wooden quote? Not everyone gets treated equally, everyone gets treated fairly. Aaron Rodgers in New York last year, great example of this with the Jets, was basically just given carte blanche to do whatever Aaron Rodgers wanted to do. Skip workouts, miss mandatory minicamp, go to Egypt, whatever he was doing, his dark retreats, etc. Nobody else was given that freedom, and obviously it did not work out. Contrast that to Sean Payton when he got to Denver, and one of the first things he did was he kicked Russell Wilson's private trainer out of the facility. He said, no, that's not how we're going to operate here. Nobody who is not an employee of the team is going to be in the facility. And Sean Payton firmly put his stamp on that program. Russell Wilson was gone. The Broncos have taken off. How about this one? At the high school level, the weed that is the invasive parent. Dealing with the parent before the parent becomes a cancer, a weed, a problem is a huge one. If you allow parents to have too much agency, if you allow them to get too close to your program, it can take off from there. I made that mistake as a young head coach. My first year as a head coach, the previous head coach had not had a great relationship with the parents. And when I first met with the Booster Club, one of the requests they made was, hey, can the parents have more access? They would love to just be able to have a dialogue with you about some things. And I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. Little did I realize that many of those parents saw that as an opportunity to try to manipulate things. They were coming at it with an agenda. And I was a little bit naive, and I kind of had to learn the hard way about how to find the sweet spot between dealing with parents, engaging them, giving them the opportunity to have a dialogue with you versus giving them license to control things. Another thing that I think is incredibly important for a head coach to be able to weed is the interaction of all the other coaches, the other assistants. One thing you have to realize, if you're going to be a head coach, you have to realize this. Your assistants are going to talk trash about you. And I don't mean that in a like a devastating way. I don't mean maliciously. But you're the head man. Everybody who's ever been in charge of anything knows that the people who aren't in charge think from time to time they know better. Sometimes they do. But they also don't understand how hard it is to actually be in charge. You don't know what it's like in the captain's chair until you've sat in the captain's chair. And so you'll probably get text messages from your assistants back and forth. Yo, what's Kev doing? Why are we running this? That practice today, that was a mess. What's he doing? You get that kind of stuff. Again, not maliciously, but if it does begin to fester, if it does become more malicious in intent, you've got a significant problem on your hand. You have to, as a head coach, be able to give your assistants ownership of the program, give them responsibility, have a dialogue with them. And if you tell them no, which you absolutely need to do from time to time, have a reason for it. Allow them to feel included in the process, even if they don't always get what they want. In the end, if you weed the garden, you'll probably be able to keep your locker room together. The most damning thing I think that can be said of a head coach is they've lost the locker room. Matt Eberflus in Chicago last year, you saw that headline a lot about Matt Eberflus. He's lost the locker room. They lost the game in November to Detroit. I think it was their 6th loss in a row. And starting corner Jalen Johnson went off in the locker room afterwards and basically trashed Matt Eberflus up one side and down the other to everybody in that room, which included Eberflus. And it got so bad that Eberflus had to leave. He just walked out. That doesn't happen spontaneously. That doesn't happen because of a one-off, because one little thing triggered it. That happens because the weeds have overtaken the garden. You haven't weeded the garden. Urban Meyer, remember his brief and horrendous tenure in Jacksonville? He got there and he treated the professionals as though they were 19-year-old college kids and that he was still the most important person in the program. Well, when you get to the NFL and the guys on the team are making 3 and 4 times the salary you're making as the head coach, you're not the most important guy anymore. When Dak Prescott trashed Mike McCarthy publicly, they didn't get rid of Dak Prescott. Urban Meyer didn't learn that lesson. He treated his players like crap. They rebelled against him. He was gone. He lost the locker room. Losing's not the only thing that will make you do it. Again, it's not always, the losing matters, but it's not just the losing. Take Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell went 3-13-1 his first year in Detroit. He didn't lose the locker room. He gained support. They went 3-13-1, and that locker room got stronger because he weeded the garden. He built a culture of respect, and those players believed in him. And they went 9-8 the next year. And they went 12-5 in 2023, and they went 15-2 last year. He endured the hard times because he was a good gardener. So, if you want to be a head coach, you'd better weed the garden. All right, that is our Monday episode here at the Call Sheet Daily Podcast. Going to be an exciting week. Got some exciting guests on tap, so stay with it here on the show. Enjoy your July otherwise, and I'll catch everybody tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone.